Hi, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to another YouTube video. I'm finally getting around to posting my unmedicated water birth story. I think any woman, no matter how you give birth, is amazing. This is just my experience and my experience only. If you are hoping to have an unmedicated water birth, I'm gonna break it down for you exactly how mine went. Everyone's is different. I did have a lot of physical prep during my pregnancy, a lot of mental prep, a lot of knowledge acquisition. I think all of those things are very, very important. But overall, if you want to have an unmedicated birth, staying strong mentally, it doesn't matter how physically fit and strong you are, if you're not able to push through adversity when you're in difficult situations, you're probably not going to be able to make it happen for yourself. But I think anyone can do it. I don't have a specifically high pain tolerance. I don't consider myself to even have a high pain tolerance, like literally at all. But I did it. I'm proud of myself. All right, just to wrap up that intro segment, I think that giving birth is definitely the coolest thing that I've ever done, and I'm really, really happy that everything went exactly as planned. I did try to film the entire birth video. Yesterday, I rolled out for an independent nap, and then she woke up immediately. I have her on the nap camera right now, so we'll see how long I can get through talking about this. I'm gonna try to go through it as quickly as possible, but also keep in mind that I gave birth almost exactly 6 months ago by the time this video goes up. I will have a 6-month-old baby, which is absolutely crazy. And really the most important thing is that you have a healthy baby. It doesn't matter how your baby enters this world, but also I think it's really disheartening to tell moms that, because you should still want the best for yourself. You should still want to, if you want to have an unmedicated birth, great. If you want to have an epidural, great. Whatever you want, be confident in that decision. And I think it's important to get as much information as possible while you're in pregnancy, because when push comes to shove, I can tell you that when I entered the hospital at 9 centimeters dilated, I definitely had some fear because I didn't know I was 9 centimeters dilated. I had already been in labor for 14 hours at that point, and I was already like, I don't know how much I can take. But because I watched so many birth stories throughout my pregnancy, I was like, okay, I know that the pushing is gonna be relieving, because every single video I listened to said, the contractions leading up to getting 10 centimeters dilated, that was the worst part. Once you hit 10 centimeters dilated and you actually start pushing, that's when it starts to be relieving, and it wasn't painful, it didn't hurt at all. So even though it was very intense, I do not think that actually pushing the baby out was painful. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. But anyways, going all the way back to the beginning. So I wanted to be as intervention-free as possible throughout my pregnancy. My goal was spontaneous labor. I wanted to go unmedicated, but I was also open to whatever needs to happen will happen. So I knew that, you know, if I didn't get my baby into the right position, if she was breech, probably was gonna have to have a C-section. If I wasn't making progress and I needed to get an epidural and that was the only option before getting a C-section, then yeah, I would. But again, whatever option you have, whatever you're doing with your birth, it's important to get educated about all of the possibilities, because you want to have a positive experience. But I wanted to be as intervention free as possible. However, once I hit my due date, I started to kind of freak out, because I was getting all these texts from everyone like, is the baby here yet? I started to kind of panic. I was like, why isn't she here yet? I just want her to be here. I had a really great positive pregnancy, but at the same time, I was like, okay, I'm ready to be a mom. I'm ready to go through pregnancy, labor, delivery, be done with all of it. So once I hit 40 weeks and 2 days pregnant, I was like, I have no idea how dilated I am. I haven't had any cervical checks my entire pregnancy, but you know what? Let me try a membrane sweep. So I was 40 weeks and 2 days pregnant. At 4:30 p.m., I got a membrane sweep, and it was successful. I was only 1.5 centimeters dilated and about 70 to 80% effaced. She did mention that my baby was slightly off position. So she said your labor is probably gonna be more painful, and she suggested that I go home and do some stretches to get her into a better position, which I did that night, and it did work. I have a ton of videos on all the things that I did physically to prep for birth in my entire pregnancy playlist, but I'm not gonna talk about for this video. I'm trying to stay on topic for this talk. And again, my brain is kind of short-circuiting. I don't have that much time. I'm just trying to get this all out there. But anyways, the membrane sweep was successful, because the next morning at about 12 hours later, about 4:30 in the morning, I started feeling what I would describe as cramping. I was like, okay, this feels weird. It was definitely like tightening. It definitely felt, I've never had period cramps, but I would imagine that if you had period cramps before, that's what it would feel like. I was like, this feels weird. But the weird thing about it was really frequent from the beginning. So every 5 minutes I was having cramping for about 45 seconds long. I wasn't timing it or anything. I kind of just let myself be for the next 2 hours. I was like, you know what? I'm probably not in labor. It might be prodromal labor. I'm probably not in labor. I don't know. I don't know what this is. But then at about 6:30, I told my husband, I was like, I'm cramping. And he was like, are you sure you're cramping, or do you think you're actually in labor? And I was like, no, I'm not in labor. I'm just cramping. It's probably prodromal labor. And I just kept saying that on and on and on and on and on. Literally from 6:30 in the morning when I told him that I had some cramping until we finally left my house at 3 p.m. And he actually had to step outside of the room and call the hospital and be like, okay, I think my wife is in labor. And he was explaining what was happening. He was timing the contractions. They were getting really close together. By the time we left my house, the contractions were 3 minutes apart. So throughout that time, I was like, no, I'm not in labor. I was just trying to stay out of it, because from watching all of the birth story videos that I watched leading up to my labor, I was like, okay, the biggest no-no that you don't want to do is get into labor land. You want to be putting off thoughts of labor for as long as possible. So even though I was in pain and I was hoping I was in labor, and the contractions were very frequent, and they were eventually, by the time between 4:30 in the morning to 3 p.m. when I left for the hotel, which that's a whole nother situation. I'll get into that later. I didn't go to the hospital right away after that. I had a long drive to the hospital because where I wanted to labor and have a water birth, it was an hour away from my house. But anyways, so I was just trying to basically put off thoughts of labor for as long as possible. And during this time, I started to try different coping mechanisms, because you want to try everything out when you're in early labor, because there's going to be some things that are really helpful, and there's going to be some things that are okay, and there's going to be some things that you absolutely hate. So the number one thing that I stayed glued to the entire time from about, I want to say like a few hours into starting contractions, was my birthing comb. I did not let go of that birthing comb from about probably 7:30 in the morning until I had my baby at 10:16 p.m. that same day. My hand was probably a little bit swollen from how tightly I was gripping the birthing comb. I tried the TENS unit during that time, and I thought it was very uncomfortable and it didn't help me, but some people find that helpful. Counter pressure was helpful while I was still laboring at home. It didn't help me once I got to a certain point though. I will say that the biggest thing that helped me stay at home as long as possible was just trying to not have thoughts of labor. Even though I knew, like in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, I am in labor, but I kept telling my husband over and over, I'm not in labor, I'm not in labor. And he kept calling the hospital, kind of update and be like, this is what's happening. She's definitely in labor. But I was like, no, I'm not in labor. Other thing that I was doing during this time, even though this was still early labor, like it was intense. I never had more than a 5-minute break the entire 18 hours that I was in labor. And by the time I left for the hotel, I was 3 minutes apart between every contraction. So you do have breaks, you do have times where you're not in pain, but the contractions are not comfortable. And they did get intense more and more and more as I got through the laboring process. But during this time from 4:30 in the morning till 3 p.m., I was still at home. I was just laying on the couch, trying to watch TV. I had The Big Bang Theory on, was finishing up, finally watching that show. I was trying to just close my eyes and I wasn't sleeping, but I was like, maybe I can just rest. And I was sideways on the couch, and I found that once I got to a certain point, I could no longer be in contraction sideways on the couch, but I was also really wanting to preserve my energy as long as possible. I knew that if I was like, okay, let me get up, let me get counter pressure, let me rock my hips side to side, let me be on the bouncy ball, doing all these weird moves. I knew if I did that too early, especially since I was anticipating a long labor, I was like, I'm not going to be able to sustain that. So I'm so glad that I tried to rest and stay, sideways laying on the couch during those contractions. Again, I was just glued to my birthing comb. Once I finally did leave for the hotel at 3 p.m. So this was a long time. 4:30 in the morning till 3 p.m., never more than a 5-minute break. And it did not seem like that long though, because I was not thinking about it. I wasn't looking at the clock. My husband was doing all that. He was timing the contractions. He was communicating with the hospital. He was doing everything. Once I got towards the end at about 2 p.m., I started being like, okay, we need some counter pressure. I need to be kneeling, draped over the couch. I can't be sideways comfortable anymore at this point. Like, this is starting to get intense. At this point I was like, okay, I have a 1-hour drive to the hospital, so I don't think I can make that in any more of an intense state than I'm at, because at this point, 3 p.m., I was about 3 minutes between contractions. Contractions were about 90 seconds long. I don't know, I was a math teacher, but my brain is not functioning right now very well, so I'm not gonna do the math of how many contractions that would be on a car ride, hour long. But anyways, so I was like, okay, we need to just make this drive, stay in a hotel, try to labor, not go to the hospital, because I don't want to be in labor land. I still want to be putting this off as long as possible. But at this point I was finally accepting, okay, I'm probably going to have this baby today. I don't think my body is stopping this now. I think that it's happening whether I'm ready for it or not, so I need to get ready for it. The drive to the hotel, luckily, it eased up a little bit. I still had very frequent contractions, but I would say they were a little less intense. But laboring in a car is very uncomfortable, because you can't be like, okay, let me go kneel over and rock my hips side to side. Let me do a lunge. Let me manipulate my body into a way that's comfortable. You have to be laying, sitting upright in a car. I mean, I was leaning back. I was like twisting, grabbing my birthing cone, but trying to breathe. Another thing is I pretty much had my eyes closed the entire day. I'm not one of those people who can be like, oh, let me just try to just talk and carry on with my normal activities. I was like, I need to be in the zone. Even though I was putting off thoughts of labor, I was in the mindset of I need to preserve my energy as much as possible. So I'm just gonna close my eyes, relax, and just let my body try to relax as much as possible. And another thing is, I had only had 2 protein bars the entire day. Before I left for the hospital, before I left for the hotel, before the hospital, I puked. So that was another sign that I was like, okay, I should probably, this is getting intense. So I puked up everything that I had ate that day. I had been religiously drinking water in between contractions, puked up a bunch of water, and I lost my mucus plug. So that was the sign before getting into the car that I was like, okay, we should probably get a little bit closer in proximity where we need to be. Once we parked at the hotel, so we got through the drive, the contractions, the intensity dipped down a little bit, so it wasn't as bad. And then we parked at the hotel, we walked up to the hotel room, and as I was walking from the car to the hotel room, I was having extremely frequent contractions. I remember walking by, there was a dad and a little kid, and I was just, the little kid was probably like, what is happening? Because I was just like, my arms were on the side of the wall, and I was just having a contraction, and I was just standing up, leaning against the wall, breathing, just super pregnant, past 40 weeks pregnant, 40 weeks and 3 days pregnant to be precise. And I was just, I was in my own little world. I was kind of knowing what was happening around me, but I was really just like, okay, my husband needs to be in control of all of that, and I'm just gonna be in my own little world, just keeping my eyes closed, just taking it one contraction at a time. If you start to think ahead, if you start to think of, oh, how much worse is this gonna be, it's gonna get really, really hard for you. So I was just trying to take it one contraction at a time, and every time that it was my chance to rest, I was like, okay, I am going to rest, I'm going to enjoy it, I'm gonna savor, and I'm gonna appreciate this rest as much as I possibly can. So once we got into the hotel room, we had all the lights off, it was very dimly lit. I was just the whole entire time kneeling with my arms draped over on the side of the couch. Even when I was not having a contraction, I was resting like that. When I was having a contraction, I was in that position. I was pretty much in that position the entire time. I mean, pretty much almost, I'll talk about the exceptions to that, but yeah, pretty much I was up in that position all the way time until my baby came out. But I was just in my own little world. At that point, counter pressure was no longer helpful. My husband was super, super supportive the entire time. He was right there next to me. He was right there with me. He was feeling everything that I was feeling without obviously feeling it himself. But I was like, okay, I just need my space. I need to be in the zone. Pretty much my eyes were closed. Even though I felt like I could carry on conversations between contractions, it's like, I really don't want to, because if I'm having conversations, I'm probably gonna say stuff like, I don't know if I could do this, or I don't know. Or if I'm having a conversation and then I switch into a painful contraction, I might lose my focus. But I was like, okay, I just need to stay in the zone and I need to keep pushing through. So I was just living in that land, having really intense back to back to back contractions. They were rolling through like back to back to back, never more than a 3-minute rest. And they were 90 to 120 seconds each, and they were getting more and more and more intense. It was clear that I was in transition at this point. I also puked a second time of the day. So I was losing all of the water, and my husband was keeping me hydrated. I was drinking water in between every single contraction, every single rest period. You want to savor and appreciate those rests as much as you can. But never during this time was I like, I don't think I can do this. Again, I was just taking it one step at a time. And I was trying to, my goal was stay out of the hospital as long as possible. Because once you get into that hospital, your mindset's gonna shift. You might tense up, you might not be able to relax and surrender as much. But then I went to the bathroom and I did have a bloody show. And then that was after puking a second time of the day. I was like, okay, I should probably go to the hospital just to get this checked out, even though that's totally normal to have that happen. But we drove, and then this was another 15-minute drive to the hospital. And in that 15-minute drive to the hospital, I had, I think, 5 contractions in the car. The walk from the hotel room to the car, I had 3 contractions, and then the drive from the hotel to the hospital, I had 5 contractions, and they were getting really, really, really intense. And then once I parked at the hospital, I had 3 contractions, literally just walking, super, super short walk from the parking lot, the emergency pregnancy delivery, into the lobby. I had 3 contractions, and I was just, same thing as when I mentioned that story of when I was walking up to the hotel room, where I was just find something to lean against and just surrender my body weight onto it, close my eyes, zone out, breathe. You need to breathe and relax. If you're not breathing, you're gonna be tensing up and everything's just gonna get more painful. And then my husband was like, yeah, my wife's in labor. We need to get into a delivery room. And they're like, okay, let me buzz you in. But before they could even buzz me in, I was already arms draped over the couch, having another contraction, and I could not hold it back. I puked again a 3rd time onto the couch cushion in the hospital lobby. And at this point, I was starting to doubt myself. I was starting to panic because I was like, I don't know how much worse this is going to get. This was when my fear kicked in. And again, this is why I'm glad I stayed out of the hospital for as long as possible, because I got here, I was like, I don't know if I could do it. I might need an epidural. I don't know if I could push through this. We went to get checked. She didn't even have to check my cervix. She was like, I can tell you need to just get into a room. Let's just get you into a room. And then they were also concerned about the fact that I had puked 3 times. I had only ate 2 protein bars, puked all that out. So I had no nutrition, no fluids, nothing in my body the entire day. So I think my face was going a little bit pale at this point. And I didn't feel dehydrated. I still felt like I was hydrated because I still kept drinking water, but they were like, we might need to put an IV in you. But I was having such frequent back-to-back contractions at this point that I was like, I literally can't even get comfortable. I was on the hospital bed at this point. They put me into the room. I was on the hospital bed. I was kneeling with my arms on the hospital bed. That's the main reason why I wanted to go unmedicated, so I can move and actually feel what's happening during the contractions. But I was like, I can't even put my arm out for them to put the IV in, because they were so back to back. They were like, we need to wait until you have a break from these contractions, then we can give you an IV. And so my husband was advocating for me. He was like, let's just try an anti-nausea pill instead. And at this point, I still hadn't gotten my cervix checked. I had no idea how much progress I had made. I was so delusional. I was like, maybe I'm only 3 centimeters at this point. But then finally, after about an hour, I had a somewhat of a break where she could check my progress. And the nurse, she said, you are 9 centimeters dilated and I can get this baby out right now if you want. And at that point, I was like, I can do it. It was the most relieving thing that I had ever heard in my entire life. I was 9 centimeters dilated. So I was like, I don't need an epidural. I can do this. I'm gonna go through with the plan, fill up the birthing tub. and my baby just woke up, so I'll finish the story later. I'll see if I could finish this real quickly with her here. But anyways, I was 9 centimeters dilated. The birthing tub was getting filled up. I had been laboring for an hour, and the nurse literally told me I could get this baby out of you right now. But I was like, okay, now I want this to slow down. So I got into the birthing tub, and it was the best feeling that I have ever felt in my entire life. It was the most relieving feeling in the world. Let me tell you, it felt like if I was getting an epidural. I mean, I'm sure epidural numb you out completely, but it literally felt like the most relieving thing in the entire world. I just slid right in, I sat in, I felt like I was getting into a hot tub. I was like, oh, this is so nice. And then I, started having contractions again, but it felt more peaceful. It felt like it slowed down a little bit, and I was finally giving my body a chance to have a little bit of a rest after it being so intense. I think I was definitely at 10 centimeters dilated, but I didn't have any more cervical checks the rest of this time. So I waited another 2 hours. So it was 1 hour on the hospital bed, 2 hours in the birthing tub, having frequent contractions, but they were slowing down a little bit. And then I started to feel the urge to push. I didn't actually have to get my cervix checked. It was just kind of evident that I was 10 centimeters dilated because my body started involuntarily pushing, and I was pushing for an hour. I really wanted to make sure that I didn't tear. So I wanted to like stretch everything out and, push gradually. And when you're pushing, you're relaxing your pelvic floor and you are pushing with your core. So that's where I was thanking myself for working hard, keeping up my workouts all the way up until past my due date, because it was definitely very, very helpful. So yeah, I was pushing. And then at the end of every contraction, so it feels relieving when you're pushing. When you're pushing while you are unmedicated, it's like you go from this intense pain where you feel like you're out of control of your body, and then all of a sudden you're able to push and like have some control where you're like, I can do this, I can push out the baby. I was trying to wait and see if I had the fetal ejection reflex, where the baby just kind of like comes out where your body is, but after an hour I was like, okay, I'm just ready for this to be done. So the whole hour that I was pushing, you have the regular few minutes break in between contractions, so you're not actually pushing for an hour. It's like you're pushing really, really hard for like 60, 90 seconds, but I would kind of like let up. I was like pushing really, really hard, and I felt her descend further down, but then I got scared. It's like, I'm not ready. Let me just rest and let me try again next time. I would push. It's like, no, I'm not ready. And then they were monitoring me. They would, in between every contraction, they were monitoring to make sure heart rate was good and everything was stable and everything was happy, fine, dandy. My husband was super supportive during this time, the entire time as well. He was on the edge of the birthing tub with me the entire time. I had my birthing comb still too, and I was kneeling on the edge, and I wanted to make sure I was opening up the pelvic outlet, so I have my knees and ankles out during this entire time. I did try lunging at some point. One of the nurses suggested it, but I was like, this is so uncomfortable. I literally was only comfortable if I was kneeling on the edge. But yeah, I got to a point after an hour where I was like, this is going to be the last push. I am getting the baby out. I'm ready to meet her. I pushed. I did not let up at the end of the contraction. I pushed. I did not feel any pain. I did not feel any ring of fire. I was so amazed. I was like, this is crazy. I don't think I tore at all. I definitely don't feel like I did. And then she came out, and I was shocked. I was like, I can't believe, for some reason I was in denial my entire pregnancy. I was like, there's not even a baby in here. I don't even know what she's gonna look like. I had no idea what to expect. She came out, she was perfect. She was tangled up in her umbilical cord, so crazy, where it was like around her neck and then tied around her shoulders and her hips, her entire body. She was having a time in there. She was having a fun time, but I could tell that she was okay, so I didn't freak out or anything. They just quickly untangled it. And then I brought her to my chest, and it was like the best feeling ever. So surreal. And now she's 6 months and I can't believe it. But yeah, then I got to stay in the tub for a little bit. My husband cut the umbilical cord, and then I got to walk immediately. I walked to the hospital bed. I delivered the placenta, just one push. The placenta came right out, and it was perfectly intact and everything. So I was also kind of scared about that, because I've heard horror stories. Sometimes people, they go unmedicated, they endure all that pain, and then they have to get a C-section for the placenta. So I was like, I definitely do not want that. But yeah, everything, I was just in complete disbelief. I felt so amazing. I had so much adrenaline where I was like, I can't believe I just did that. I can't believe how perfect she was. She latched right away. It was so amazing. Honestly, it could not have gone any better. I think the number one things that got me through it were having a very, very supportive husband. He was making all the calls. I didn't have to do any thinking throughout the entire day because he was there making all those decisions. He's also delivered babies in the field with his job because he's a fire captain. Didn't have to do any thinking there, which was great. And then also denying thoughts of labor, trying to stay at home as long as possible. The less you're in the intense thought of being in labor, the better, because the more time you have to think about it, the more you might doubt yourself, I think. Because at the end, I did have that moment when I got to the hospital. I was like, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know how much progress I made. I don't know how much worse it's gonna get. But then again, once I knew that I had done all the hard work, I was like, okay, we're here. Pushing is not scary. So do not be scared of anything and take it one contraction at a time. Literally just be in the moment. Do not look at the clock. Again, have your husband, have someone there with you to be that person for you. You should not have to worry about anything. And then just get some knowledge about what's going to happen with your body during that process so you feel empowered. I think that my birth went amazingly, and I'm honestly in disbelief with how everything went exactly according to plan, but it wasn't by accident. I don't have a super high pain tolerance like I mentioned at the beginning of the video. I'm not someone who's like, I hurt myself and I'm like, oh, I didn't even do anything. I'm like, I'll bump my toe and I'm like super dramatic about it. But I did it, anyone can do it. I am going to now, I think I might need a diaper change. I'm going to, once she goes down for another nap, I'll finish recapping my postpartum recovery because I am starting a powerlifting competition prep, which I'm going to talk about in the next series, but I'm wrapping up this unmedicated birth story. I feel like I've been talking forever. I'm trying to get through this as quickly as possible because there's a lot of time that's passed and I want to get caught up on everything. So I'm going to talk about my first 6 weeks postpartum and then my first 6 months of training. And then I'm going to start my powerlifting prep video in the next video, but I'm going to play with her for now and then I'll be back later. All right, so the boring part of postpartum recovery, those first 6 weeks. And I was dreading this. This was the only thing that I was not looking forward to about the whole birth, postpartum experience, everything. However, when you do have a new baby and you're bonding with that baby, the time is so precious. It goes by so quickly. So really not being able to do my regular fitness routine, it didn't mean as much as I thought it would. And really it wasn't, even though I was super active and I lifted all the way up until past my due date, I was okay without it. So just keep that in mind. You'll be fine, you'll survive, and those 6 weeks are gonna go by fast because I was cluster feeding around the clock, I was contact napping, I was waking up day and night, getting like 2 hours of sleep a night. I'm still nursing during the night. But those first 6 weeks, take it easy on yourself and just relax. However, I will say don't do nothing, because you're gonna get clearance probably likely at 6 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks. I got clearance at 4 weeks to just kind of do whatever. But it depends on how your birth goes, and it's no accident. If you have a smooth birth, you're gonna have a smoother postpartum recovery. But just to kind of break it down week by week, what I did, I just pretty much did nothing those first couple days. Once I was 3 days postpartum, I was able to go on my first walk, and I kind of gradually lengthened the walks from there. I was doing 10,000 steps a day all the way throughout my pregnancy, and then I was getting about 5,000 steps a day, counting around the house and just going on very, very light strolls around the neighborhood. I started gradually increasing the walk duration length over time. And then at 3 days postpartum, I also started reconnecting to my core and pelvic floor. So just doing breathing exercises. Once I was 7 days postpartum, so a full week, I kind of wrote myself a program. So I did just movements that I would regularly do, but without weight. So think like single leg RDLs, body weight squats, single leg hip thrust, even just like some single arm dumbbell rows. And I did a lot of exercises to just kind of open up my shoulder blades, keep my posture good, because when you're nursing literally 24/7 around the clock, cluster feeding after you have your baby, it's a lot of positions that aren't necessarily the most natural and comfortable. So you want to make sure you're opening everything up. I spend about 30 minutes every single day just doing those pelvic floor core recoveries. Once I was 2 weeks postpartum, so I added bands and some very, very light dumbbells. So continuing to progress my movement. So if I started with just body weight squats, I was actually just starting squatting. So I went from squatting for 2 reps, 225 pounds while I was pregnant, to just squatting my body weight at 2 weeks postpartum. And then I added like a light dumbbell. I started with just squatting down to a bench, and then squatting with my body weight without a bench, and just making sure that I'm focusing on the core and pelvic floor connection, not doing anything crazy. And then when I was 3 weeks postpartum, I felt good to add a little bit more weight. So I was just doing like 135 pounds. Not saying that I would recommend you doing this if you don't feel comfortable. Obviously, general guideline would be just don't lift any weights whatsoever. But if you feel good and if your strength level is high, then like 135 feels like air to me. So I wouldn't consider myself doing a workout. But also, I didn't want to go from just moving my body weight and doing like bird dogs, cat cows, all those really like gentle movements to just trying to lift super, super heavy. So I wanted to kind of see some progression week to week. So I started adding in some just very, very light barbells. I don't think I went above, like I think I did really, really light RDLs with 155 pounds when, keep in perspective, I'm doing that for reps with 250 pounds while I'm pregnant 9 months. So not a lot of weight for me. And I'm thinking of my core and pelvic floor as I'm doing those movements. And then I just gradually progressed from there. At 5 weeks postpartum, I felt like I was ready to get back into powerlifting. So I started powerlifting programming, and then I still kept a really, really gradual approach. So I made sure that I wasn't jumping into anything too fast, too furious, just making sure that I was feeling comfortable with everything. So I didn't have any leaking, I didn't have any bleeding, I didn't have any incontinence. Any of those things would tell you that you're doing too much too soon. Even though it might sound like a lot, like I'm adding weights, it's really, really not anything compared to what I was doing beforehand. Now, if you're not doing anything beforehand, I would say just stick with light pelvic floor, core, completely body weight, maybe some bands. Don't do anything, just wait. Obviously, listen to the clearance of your doctor. But once I got to 5 weeks, I started my powerlifting program. So I'm kind of going to break down the progressions of my strength, where I was starting at, which was dipped down significantly from all those weeks off, and then how it really went back up to no loss, pretty much, because I got to where I was before pregnancy, almost. So I'll talk about that in the next segment. All right, so hopping back into it, this is take 5,000 to get this done. I have my baby down for a solo nap. What I do, life hack, is if your baby doesn't like transfer into the crib, get a floor bed, nurse to sleep, and then once your baby is asleep, you can gently and quietly roll out, so that way you're not actually having to physically move them, and then they wake up and realize where they're at, and they're like, where am I? Why am I in here? But at least this will get her through a sleep cycle where she can sleep by herself, and then she'll wake up after a sleep cycle, realize I'm not there, and then I'll need to come back and finish the nap with her. But anyways, so my first 6 weeks, really for myself, it was 5 weeks until I got back into the regular swing of things. And again, that's just because that's what felt good to me. And absolutely 100% listen to your body, listen to your doctor or midwife, listen to the guidelines that are being given to you. What I'm saying is not meant to be like a comparison of you should be lifting weights in those first 6 weeks. I don't think that at all. I'm just saying that that's what I did because I was lifting a certain amount of weight before, even though I was lifting weights during those first few weeks before I was all cleared to get back into the swing of things. I did not consider it to be an actual workout. It was just something very, very light, stay moving. And again, to have some sort of progression, because your pelvic floor is not going to get stronger if you're not adding load to it. You can do all the bird dogs, all the cat cows, all the super light body weight pelvic floor work in the world, but your pelvic floor isn't going to get stronger unless you start adding load to it. And I'm not saying that should be done in the first 6 weeks. That's just what felt good to me. And again, I wasn't adding a lot of weight. And even when I got cleared, I still waited an extra week to get back into my full regular powerlifting, getting back on my programming. And when I got back into it, I was still easing back in. When I did my first postpartum training block, so at 2 months postpartum, I finished my first training block, and I was about 40 pounds less on squat than I was before I was pregnant. So I was lifting 195 pounds for sets of 5 at 2 months postpartum, where before pregnancy I was able to do that for 235 pounds for 5 reps. But then by 6 months postpartum, I was at 225 pounds for sets of 3, which is only 15 pounds under where I was at before for a set of 3. So not too bad. I still have a little bit of way to go to make up in my squat. And then on bench, it was a lot slower of a progress just because I didn't lose as much, but I did change my bench positioning a lot during pregnancy. So the strength loss is mostly just in terms of a change of positioning versus actually losing strength. So I started my first postpartum training block at 2 months postpartum. I was doing 135 pounds for sets of 3. And then by 6 months postpartum, I was able to do it for sets of 5. And I was also going up to 145 pounds for 2 reps, which still was about 15 pounds under where I was at for those volume sets before I got pregnant. But on the other hand, I did mention that I changed my touch point. So in comparing some other upper body movements, I was starting, the first time I tried to do pull-ups was at 4 weeks postpartum, I think, and I only did 3 reps comfortably with my body weight. And then most recently at 6 months postpartum, I was able to do 3 reps with an extra 35 pounds on top of my body weight. And I was able to easily do sets of 10 reps on pull-ups. So my upper body did get pretty much back to where it was in some aspects, but my bench still has about 15 pounds of catching up to do on those volume sets. But deadlift has been the most shocking because even though I haven't been able to pull off the ground during pregnancy, I wasn't able to pull off the ground after 28 weeks pregnant. I had to start elevating my deadlifts because my belly got so big. At the end of my first postpartum training block at 2 months postpartum, I was doing 265 pounds for sets of 5 paused. And then most recently I did 325 pounds for 3 reps, which is only 5 pounds under where I was on a deadlift bar before I got pregnant. So pretty much my deadlift is exactly the same. My squat and bench are a little bit weaker, but the fact that my deadlift is pretty much the same gave me the motivation that I needed to sign up for my next powerlifting competition. And I'll talk about this in my next video a lot more, but I'm mostly doing this meet to have a good time, have fun, be able to bring my daughter, and I'm still gonna be timing like nursing sessions and nap times around the meet, but I still think it will be really cool to experience a peak after having so many changes that my body has been through over these last 9 months of pregnancy and 6 months postpartum. It's been a lot, and then I still have 3 more months to build up my strength. So I'm not having any like super high expectations. I really just want to see what my body can do peaking. And notice how in this video I haven't talked anything about like getting my pre-pregnancy body back, even though it happens with time and I feel like I look the same as I did before pregnancy. I don't think that should be your focus. I think that being able to move your body and feel good is the most important thing postpartum. And me getting back into fitness isn't like, oh, I'm gonna try to set some like PRs, I'm trying to get as lean as possible. No, I'm trying to keep up my nutrition high for breastfeeding. I'm trying to be a good mom, and I'm trying to move my body so I can still have like some self-care and feel good. And I still have goals. I still want to get back stronger than I was before, and I know I will, but I'm still taking a nice and slow and gradual approach. And I've been having a lot of fun with my training postpartum. It's been really cool. Like I said, my strength has been coming back quickly, but I haven't been rushing it. I waited until I want to say 4 months postpartum to even add a belt. I still had a high focus on the pelvic floor. Even at 4 months postpartum, I was doing pause reps on deadlift for 300 pounds for sets of 3 without a belt, which was only 8 pounds under what my all-out max was with a belt. So my core has definitely gotten stronger through pregnancy, through birth, through postpartum. I've still been pushing like single leg exercises, my hypertrophy bodybuilding exercises, all those things. And I'm gonna try to make my videos like more about kind of the process of how I've gotten here. And I'll still kind of talk about my postpartum recovery, but I want to get caught up into real time into where I'm at right now, which is starting my powerlifting competition prep. So I'm gonna start a new series and I'll have lots of different topics. I can even go back because I kind of like brushed through a lot of topics. Even those first 6 weeks postpartum, I could do a full video on that if you want me to show you like all the exercises I did and how I made sure that I was rehabbing myself without pushing myself too hard, or just any topics like maintaining milk supply while breastfeeding. Whatever you want to see, just let me know. This video has been super long and I've done enough rambling to last at least until the next video. And I'm very glad that she has still stayed asleep this whole time, so that is a win. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you next week for another video. First video of comp prep too. All right, bye.